Eradication of the Population of the World by Juan Eduardo Alvea, Apaxim. We have heard many voices in this regard, stating that there is a plan to eradicate the population of the world. I will demonstrate in this speech that the eradication of the population of the world is a plan that was devised and implemented in Britain. And it currently is being held up by OPEC, the Organization of Oil Producing Countries, which is the multinational network of corporations endorsing and sponsoring this plan. Quotations. From Herod to Bush, World Revolution. Close quotations. It's an insightful book written by Salvador Abascal, a Mexican politician and ideologist. The book explains about the global plan for the decimation of human beings as a part of a well-orchestrated program sponsored by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. That program, which we call Populus Exterminators, will lend money to nations in the order of 50, 70, $100 billion, but only as long as those plans are put in place. In other words, they need to build, quotations, camps where genocide can be implemented, close quotations. The loans are acquired by the nations themselves, with the condition that they implement covert genocide. They name it population control policies. According to Abascal, this current annihilation of humanity is very similar to what Herod did 2,000 years ago to protect his kingdom. For he heard a king was born of Bethlehem, and he killed hundreds of children. Today, the genocide is a political plan trying to eradicate certain races, religions, and nations from the face of the earth to give way to the oligarchy of multinational corporations, namely OPEC, Organization of Oil Producing Countries, and energetics. Paul Samuelson, a renowned economist, sustained that in the end of the 20th century, war would be linked to religious, racial, and national factors. So, as I was saying, the thesis of Abascal is that the IMF, a World Bank, and multinational corporations are directing and are behind the annihilation in massive amounts of human beings. I have seen many articles regarding how the Food and Drug Administration in the United States of America is responsible for poisoning its citizenry. I have also heard evidence of mercury amalgams as responsible, that's the American Delta Association, as responsible for driving populations mad with hatred and war. I have heard evidence on how hormones used to grow cows is a factor altering the behavior of massive amounts of populations, calming them and forcing a decrease in the birth of infants. There are many theories out there stating that multinational corporations are experimenting with societies via the food they give us, as well as other additives placed in the water we drink. I have heard many things, but what concerns me the most are the facts and historical events supporting my thesis that there is a plan to eradicate the population of the world. Thomas Robert Malthus, an Anglican minister, on the 18th century stated that there was going to be a population explosion. He is regarded as an economist, father and inventor of current Anglo-Saxon monetary system, which holds which holds current economic policy making. The Organization of Oil Producing Countries is the most powerful organization in the world, and they are the ones endorsing the US dollar. If it weren't for them, the US dollar would not be worth a thing. They are the ones dictating economic policy. For the value of the dollar is intrinsically related to the value of oil, which only quotes in dollars. Thus, the value of the dollar as an international trade currency and owner of the World Bank is solely dependent of the fact that the value of the dollar is based on the value of the barrel of oil. Given the almost bi-millennial belligerent history of Muslim nations, which is the regional belief of leaders of the countries having the only reserves of energetics in the planet, it's easy to assume that they still have world colonization plans. Given the history of humanity and its frailness, and understanding how easy it is for individuals to betray their affections for money, it is easy to assume that Britain, USA, and Russia sold to the interests of those nations possessing energetics that can be used to drive industries, military forces, and nations. In other words, what is the use of knowing how to make nuclear bombs if you don't have the means to create them? And oil gives you that power to do so. So yes, there is one multinational network of corporations running planet Earth, and their mission statement is the mad dream of very bad intelligence. Mr. Malthus and King Faisal. So, when you combine those two factors, Malthus and Faisal, and add them to the historic events of the past 2,000 years, we have a perfect equation for the annihilation of humanity to decimate the population of the earth. A brief recap of historic events in the past 2,000 years. Christianity is born and God establishes his kingdom on earth, defeating Satan. Muhammad is born in 570 after Christ in Mecca. Muslims claim that Muhammad ascended to heaven from the place where the Jerusalem temple was at. The name of the place is the Dome of the Rock, or the Dome of Omar. Their tradition is that there is an immense rock levitating on air, and that Muhammad rose to heaven in a white horse from that location. Another historic event is that there was a war in between the Muslims and Christianity. Christians in those times were not divided. Christianity was not divided. The Orthodox Church, currently the Russian and Greek Church, did not exist, nor the Anglican and Protestant churches. We were all Catholic. However, the Templars, the Knight Templars, fell under the deception of Satan and tried to bring the papacy to Jerusalem. The popes did not agree. For the two witnesses of the book of Revelation, Saint Peter, parenthesis, apostle, rock and holder of the keys of heaven for Jews and Gentiles, close parenthesis, and Saint Paul, open parenthesis, apostle to the Gentiles, close parenthesis, both died in Rome before bringing fire from heaven on them and being killed in Rome. Thus, the reason the Church of Christ took its place in the throne of this world, back then Rome, is because Satan, the prince of this world, was defeated and the kingdoms of the earth were taken from his stewardship. and he no longer had power to seduce the nations, but until the last days, as according to Revelation 20 and 21, chapters 20 and 21. Regardless of those instructions, the Templar Knights, Freemasons, decided to establish the See of Peter, the throne of the Church of Christ, in Jerusalem. Many wars broke out, and the Pope told the Templars to fuck off. They fled and hid in the islands of the future kingdom of Henry VIII. The Templar Knights were contaminated by the seed of Satan, and eventually, 500 years later, would deceive Henry VIII to betray the church. Going back to the year 1000, we notice the Great Schism. Nowadays, Russia and Greece are a fruit of the deception of the Freemasons, the Templars, and separated from us, no longer recognizing the Bishop of Rome. The Muslims, in the interim, gained the Mediterranean. They established the caliphates all the way to the Iberian Peninsula. In the year 700, my family, the Alvear Visigoth Knights, fought the Muslims in the north of Spain. The Muslims were never able to conquer those lands, and we defended Christianity and crowned King Don Pelayo. In other words, and without exaggerating, the Reconquista of Christian world and Spain started in the north of Spain, Asturias, and culminated in 1492 with the discovery of the Americas and the expulsion of the Moors, lest they convert to Christianity. Hence the saying, que te den morcilla, to verify they had actually converted. Not long after the discovery of America was the inheritance document given to us. All of America was given to us, Spaniard Catholics, with the exception of Brazil. And that is the reason they speak Portuguese on those lands. This will is called Tratado de Tordesillas, 1494. And the Pope gives all these lands to us, from Alaska to Argentina, America Latina, all is ours. However, the British, envious and with very long teeth, decided years later, under the influence of the Templars, Freemasons, and Saudis, to strike against us. They did, and Anglicanism was born, the Church of England, as well as the theft of America from us. The Mayflower was the first incursion into our territory. They took by force all the lands given to us, Texas, California, and the last one, Cuba, where my great-grandfather, Don Antonio Basagoiti Arteta, founder of Banco Hispano-Americano, owner of all the tobacco plantations in America, financed the war. The war was called the Spanish-American War, 1898. This war had to do with Cuba. The Americans sabotaged one of their own ships who was reposting in Cuba and blamed it on Spain. My grandfather financed the war. Spain lost Florida and the region due to the warmongers and liars. They came to steal our inheritance by force. The Americans did. They did all this because of greed and bad advice from the Muslims, who were planning a revenge against us, against Catholics. Thus far, the Muslims have managed to divide Christianity In the 11th century, it's called the East-West Schism. In the 16th century, the enemy, ill-advised via Freemasons, Henry VIII. As a result, we have the Protestant Reformation and the birth of Anglicanism, the Protestant Schism. Thus, we are starting to get the picture, to understand who the characters of the Treaty of Yalta are. Second World War. Yalta Conference in February 1945 with Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin. Of course, behind the scenes we have King Faisal, wanting to bring the rebirth of the Muslim Empire and its colonization, dreams of the whole world. The Saudi monarchs have the strategic resource that nations need in order to wage war and to keep on being industrialized nations in the modernity of times. So, King Faisal seizes the moment. Unlike any good military strategist of West Point, wages a war of treaties first. Objective: to raise the price of oil to $70 a barrel, from 20 cents to $70 a barrel. In other words, to give the Americans a leadership role in the world Faisal's descendants plan to inherit. The three big ones, in quotations, three big ones, do not have enough imagination to understand the mentality of these very old strategists of war. In the Catholic Church, we understand them, for we have fought them before, and because we are an older millennial kingdom. We also have prophecies telling us that in the later days, at the end of the millennial kingdom of Christ, Satan will come to deceive all nations in order to fight against us. However, in our books of war strategies and prophecy, we contemplate this event as the end of the world, the day of final judgment. It is a day we do not know the time of, for only the Father knows. However, we know the signs of the times and the eschatological events that need to be fulfilled in order to arrive to this final day, the day in which the universe is swallowed, like Jonah, the prophet, into the bosom of an ultra-massive black hole, responsible for the Big Bang. As a matter of fact, the event started to occur with the death of Christ 2,000 years ago. The whole universe died and resurrected then. It's not the chaos theory, but rather what the universe looks like when you are at the center of it in a massive black hole. However, I'm not a scientist, and this is mere speculation. Here we are in March 2013. We have had 2 world wars in the 20th century. And according to history books, one of those wars was responsible for the annihilation of 6 million Jews by Hitler and the assassination of 35 million Christians and Jews by Stalin. Another historical event is King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, pledging to raise the value of oil from 20 cents a barrel to $70 a barrel. Another historical event is the Treaty of Yalta in the Ukraine, where half of Europe was given to Stalin, to Stalin, which after World War II decimated the population of the USSR. It is also a fact that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of a US president, endorsed Hitler's war plans. It is also a fact that the USA turned away boats filled with Jews when they came to Ellis Island seeking refuge from Germany, of Hitler. Britain, who was in charge of Israel, also turned away Jews, stating that their maximum quota per year of immigrants was 12,000. So, it is a fact that they knew Hitler was going to establish the final solution. And not only that, but the USA helped via the Bushes with resources to carry out the extermination plan. Given the testimony of Samuelson, the economist, wars due to religion and race, of Abascal, war on Christian unborn children of Latin America, of Malthus, population explosion theories, of King Faisal, rebirth of the power of the Muslim world, and having historical testimony that with the beginning of the Muslim religion, Christians and Jews alike lost the right to Jerusalem, we conclude that there is reason enough to justify my thesis that there is a plan to eliminate humans from the face of the earth, humans of a certain race and religion. The book of Revelation states that there will be a time in which all nations will be deceived by Satan to eliminate us. We are not saying that our brothers, the Muslims, are Satan. We are just wondering if they have been deceived by the primeval serpent to destroy us. I'm going to read chapter 20 of the book of Revelation. When 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to lead astray all the nations in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, and mobilize them for war, his armies being as many as the sands of the sea. They came swarming over the entire country and besieged the camp of the saints, which is the beloved city. But fire rained down on them from heaven and consumed them. Then the devil who led them astray was hurled into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are, and their torture will not come to an end, day or night, forever and ever. Then I saw a great white throne, and the one who was sitting on it. In his presence, earth and sky vanished, leaving no trace. I saw the dead, great and small alike, standing in front of his throne, while the books lay open. And another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from what was written in the books, and their deeds deserved. The sea gave up all the dead who were in it. Death and Hades were emptied of the dead that were in them, and everyone was judged as his deeds deserved. Then death and Hades were hurled into the burning lake. This burning lake is the second death. And anybody whose name could not be found written in the book of life was hurled into the burning lake. So, will the third secret of Fatima unveil before our eyes? Will we see all the cardinals perish together with that seems like the Pope? Will there be a far greatest persecution of the Catholic Church? Would that be the end of the world? Well, we don't know those questions, but we lay out the foundations as a military strategist to understand the events of the present. This is a maximum.